welcome to our next video. So in this particular session, we will be focusing on how do we create our first database. So let's get started. First, we have this objective. So in this particular session, we'll be focusing on how do we use SqlYog to create a new database in MySQL. Define tables and columns, differentiate the different data types in MySQL, identify the steps in exporting or backing up your database using the application SqlYog. So let's identify what are the requirements before we proceed with our activity. So number one, we have XAMPP. So make sure you already installed the application because we will be using the MySQL database in XAMPP application. Number two, you have already downloaded the required software, the SqlYog. So I actually provide the link or location where you need to download this application. It's a portable version. So if you are having problem running the application or in some cases the application is detected as a virus, it's a false positive, so it's not really a virus since it's a portable. So some antiviruses detect it as a virus. So don't worry, it's safe to use. Third is PDF reader. So sometimes you use Acrobat or you can use Google Chrome to read PDF so that you can access the materials in PDF format. Okay, so let's begin. So first, let us define what is MySQL. So MySQL is considered to be the most popular and in some argue the best in open source database. So MySQL is one of the most popular because it's actually being used widely, and majority of users or majority of developers use MySQL as their database in their application. Since it's open source, you don't have to worry about the license. So it's, I think, one of the most popular database that we use in developing application because we don't have to worry about licensing. Okay. Next, MySQL is a viable competitor to pricey Goliaths, so such as Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, because those databases require subscription or licenses to operate, while MySQL is open source. So actually, Facebook is using MySQL as their database. MySQL offers excellent performance, portability, and reliability with a moderate learning curve and little at no cost. So since open source, so you don't have to worry about payment, and it's very excellent, has an excellent performance, and it's portable and reliable as well. MySQL is a database management system or DBMS for relational databases. So therefore, MySQL is a RDBMS type of database. So it actually supports relational type of databases. Okay, so let's work now on how do we create our database in MySQL. So first, of course, you need to perform the following steps. So the first step that you need to do is to run your XAMPP control panel. So specifically, in your control panel, you need to run the MySQL services. So let us demonstrate how do we do that. So in this particular window, the MySQL control panel, okay, all you have to do is to run the XAMPP control panel. So when you run your application, so let me minimize this one for you first. Okay, from this window, so as you can see, I have control panel. So first, you need to run the MySQL. So make sure your MySQL is stating that the module is running. So the action button says it's actually running. So there is a switching of caption. Okay, so that's the first step. Second, in our steps is you need to open your SqlYog and connect with MySQL. So later we will do the demonstration. So first, you need in SqlYog, you need to specify where your MySQL is needs to connect, where your SqlYog needs to connect. So in this particular window, you will now identifying the username, the password, and the port. Also, you are going to specify the host location and click the connect. So once your database for SqlYog is connected to our database, you are going to actually seeing the list of database that are being saved inside your MySQL database. So we are going to use the SqlYog application for us to be able to have a convenient way of accessing our database. So let's proceed to our next slide. Okay, so how do we create database? Step number three. First, you must go to database menu and choose the create database. Or for easier implementation or easier setup, all you have to do is to follow the shortcut. Just press in your keyboard the Control D or Control plus D in your keyboard. So once you follow the right procedure for the menu for that particular procedure, a dialog box will appear. So this is how we set a database name. So in our window, we will be defining what is your database name that you are going to assign. So you will be sometimes, depending on your needs, setting the character set and the collation. So MySQL collation is a set of rules used to compare characters in particular character set. So sometimes you will be requiring some database that supports several characters, but as default, we will set our database as UTF-8. So in SqlYog, the default configuration is UTF-8 character set. Okay, just focus now, since this is our first time developing your database, just focus on the database name part. Then once you assign your database name, just click the create button. Now, in database name, you must make sure that you need to define a descriptive name for your database so that you will be not confused of whether you are looking for that particular database, you are aware of the name that you set. Okay, so once you click the create button, you are now going to see the created database from SqlYog. For example, we created ABC store. By default, the SqlYog converts the cases into small case for standard basis. Okay, so once you create your database, you will be seeing it's like expand list button. So a plus button that allows you to expand the list. So when you click that expand button, you are going to examine the defined objects as table, views, or procedure in a particular database. So when you click that, you're going to see a list of available objects for that particular database. Okay, so now let us try demonstrating how do we create our database. So going back to our control panel that we opened a while ago. So make sure this one is running. Second, you need to open your SqlYog. So in my case, I did not set up a connection. So first click a new connection. I have now the localhost as my local computer address. The default for MySQL username is root without password. So let's click the connect. Okay, so in this particular window of SqlYog, you will be seeing a list of database available in my list. So for now, let's focus on creating or establishing a new database. Okay, so let's. Okay, so in this particular database, I have now referred the connection. So you are now seeing the list of databases available in my MySQL database RDBMS. Now, So to proceed with the steps, all you have to do is go to database, create new database. So in our example, we'll be using the ABC store. So just type the name. So as I have mentioned a while ago, so make sure your name is descriptive so that you will not be confused if you are managing several databases in your MySQL database. So after you identify the name of your database name, just click the create button. So after clicking the create button, you will be now seeing a list of objects that are available in your database. So as you can see, the SqlYog converted my name into a small case, and now I have a list of objects available. So upon clicking the expand button, you're going to see a list of objects in your database. Tables, views. Right now, it's actually blank because we did not create any objects yet in our categories of tables and views and etc. Okay, so that's how you create a database. So I think creating database is one of the most easiest part in database management because all you have to do is to set a name for it. So in our next lesson, we'll be focusing on how do we create a table. Okay, so how do we create table in our MySQL database? So first, let us define what is a table. So a table, by the way, let me adjust my screen. Okay, there. So a table is a data structure consisting of an unordered set of horizontal rows. So each containing the same number of vertical columns. The intersection of the individual row and columns is filled. So it's called a field. So each column is called a field that contains a specific piece of information. So basically a table is an arrangement of columns and rows of records. So each column contains a specific data that you need to store inside your table. Okay. Okay, so this is an example of a table. So as you can see, a table contains necessary record that I want to maintain. So it is arranged in columns and rows. So take a look at each column. So each column identifies its data that I need to manage for a specific record. For example, I have this particular record here. So as you can see, it contains specific data for each column. Okay, so each column considered as field of a particular table. So relational databases store all their data in tables. So that's what a database looks like. You are storing list of data inside a table. So it's called structured because you are trying to define the correct structure. How do we organize the data inside the table? So how do we create a table? First, in order to create a table, you must first select a database where your table needs to be created. So in our example, we'll be choosing the ABC store database. So first, you must select that or click that, or you can choose the database selection button using your SqlYog. So next, right click on that particular database that you are selected. So from the selected database, then choose create, then choose table. So right click, choose the create menu. From that menu, sub menu, choose table. Or for easier implementation of this step number 2, you have a shortcut in your keyboard called insert. So once you choose the create table, you will be seeing now a new table dialog box wherein, or a new table specification tab that will appear in your SqlYog. So first, you must define the name of the table to be created. So please take note that when you name a table, it should also be descriptive, the same with database, because what particular data that you're going to store in the table. In my case, I'll be using products as my name. So which means I'm going to store product in this particular table, or products rather. So second, you are going to make sure that you are particularly creating that particular table in a particular or a specific database that you want it to be created. Number 5, you need to define the column for each data in a table. So it's important that before you create your table, you have already a list of particular column that you need to develop or that you are going to add in your particular table. In this case, I have here a list of columns like product code, barcode, description. So these are a record that necessary to maintain a particular product inside the database. So later we're going to identify each. Okay. Okay. In setting your particular columns, you need to identify the column name. So in this case, I have already identified the list. So aside from identifying the column, you need also to define a data type for each column. So as you can see, each column also have their own designated data types, which means each data must have its own particular data type that a particular table needs to maintain or column that needs to maintain. Example, in description, I choose varchar, which means I will be storing characters. So description is all about defining or describing a product, while price is decimal because it's a numeric data type or it's a numeric value that needs to be stored there. Okay. So next, okay, let us focus on data types. So what is a data type? In MySQL, data type of a column defines what value the column can hold. So you must, of course, aside from defining the column, you must also identify the specific data type that is, we say, it's like appropriate to that particular column. For example, you will be using integer, character, or it's if you're going to store a digit like money or a particular date or a time, a binary, and so on. Database developer must decide what type of data that will be stored inside each column. So please take note of that. When creating a table, so the data type is a guideline for SQL or SQL to understand what type of data is expected inside of each column. So, and it also identifies how the SQL or the SQL interact with the stored data. So it's really important, like in programming, defining data type is important because to ensure that the correct data is being stored in that particular column. Okay, so let us explore the different data types. So in this particular example or this particular category, we have string data types. So what are the different data types that considered to be strings data type in MySQL? So we have character, varchar, binary, var binary, or binary variable length binary, the blob. So in this particular table, we are going to see an overview of the different classification of each data type. So for example, if you are going to store small characters, let's say gender or just character, choose character or car. Or some other user pronounce it as char or car. Okay. Varchar is a variable length string with the size from 0 to 65,535 allows. So that's how long. So storage use. So the length of the string is 255 bytes. Okay, so that's all. Binary. Okay, just make sure you identify the different data types that you need to use in order to effectively use that particular column. So please be guided by this particular table. So in our example, we'll be using minimal string types like car or varchar. Okay. Blob. So sometimes we use this blob to store large objects. Sometimes we use this to store picture, etc. We have tiny blob, medium, and long blob. So as you can see, the different data types has different sizes. So depending on your needs, so you need to properly select the type that depending on how much storage do you need in that particular column. So we have text. So this is actually a bigger size than varchar because it stores more 65,535 bytes. So the varchar is only stores 255 characters. We have time text, medium text, and long text. So depending on your need, on that particular value. So we have enum, so which means enum is a string object that allows you to store one value from a chosen list. So you can store several values in that particular column. So it's different from string because string is a long array of characters while enum is different data in one column. It's like an array in programming. So you can also store set, just like enum, a set of value can be stored in a particular column. Okay, so we have now numeric data types. So I have this problem in my text. This is numeric data types. Okay, so numeric data type is composed of integer, tiny int. So integer has this 4 bytes size, small int, medium int, big int, and float. So the first 3 data types considered to be numeric without decimal point. So it's whole number, while float has a decimal point. Okay, so if you are requiring to have, you need to store a data that contains decimal points, you need to use float, either float or double or decimal. Okay, or if you have minimum size of data, you can use bit. So range from 1 to 64. Next, you can also use date and time data types. Okay, if you want to store dates or time, you can use date, time, or combination of date and time. So the date and time stores date, time from hours to seconds. Okay. You can also use timestamp, so it stores time in number of seconds since from the very beginning up to depending on the data that you want to store. So sometimes you use timestamp to automatically store data upon insert. So depending on your need, if you want to just date or you just want to store time, so it depends. Also you also have year, so if you need to store year only, so you can use that one. Okay, the number of data types in MySQL is overwhelming. So how do we choose a proper data type for my column? So if you choose a data type that is too large for the data it will hold, so it will cause extra stress for your database because we'll be using additional storage. So which means take consideration of the size of data before choosing a data type, or choose the type of data that you need to store inside the column before choosing a data type. So the less storage you use, the more data you can have in memory. Okay, which means you have a minimal usage of memory if you choose minimal data type. For example, if you are just requiring digits from 1 to 10, so it's advisable to use the bit because 1 to I think 64 digits only. So, but anyway, some users prefer integer or some users prefer decimal, but it's a good consideration to identify the appropriate data type for your column or field. So next, if you choose a data type that is too small for the data, for example, you are storing a gender for a particular column, but you set 2 characters only, so what will happen? So this will cause your data to be truncated. When you say truncated, it will be shortened. So the extra character will be eliminated or discarded. So upon insert, or to have failures upon insertion because the data type won't allow those sizes of data to be inserted. So if you have set a wrong data type and suddenly add a large amount of data, so it will cause an error or truncated in return or as the result. So in this particular example, we have set the column to be varchar and we store we allow only two characters, but we say female, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters. The result will be truncated, so 2 characters only. So please take consideration of the data type before uh, designing your tables or creating your tables. Okay. So aside from aside from considering the data type, you also need to define the length. Sometimes length are optional. For example, in this particular column, we have not defined a particular length. So automatically, when you set it to blank, automatically the SqlYog assign maximum size of that particular type. But in consideration of the sizes as we mentioned a while ago, if you identify the length of a particular data, just set your preferred size, but uh, it's depend upon you. For example, barcode takes only 15 characters long, but I decided to use 25 as adjustment, so it's up to you. So we have several sizes that needs to be considered. So in my case, I have decimal data type here. So I choose 10 long characters or 10 long digits plus 2 decimal point as my limitation of displaying a decimal point. So once you add a numeric value with more than 2 decimal point, it will also be truncated or rounded up to the nearest 2 decimal point. Okay? Okay. Next, default. So the default is automatically inserted in your table once you add a new record, but sometimes we did not add default value, but it depends upon you. For example, I have a stack column, which is when I insert a new record, automatically the stack is 0. So that is initial, we call that default value. Okay, primary key. So what is a primary key? We call that PK. So a primary key is what you call a column or a set of columns. So we assign a primary key to a unique column that uniquely identify the row. So in this case, I use product code as my primary key because this particular column identifies the record. So a primary key must be unique. So I have set the code to integer, and since it's auto number, so every time that I add a new record, it will be a unique value. Okay, so when you set a primary key, this should be cannot be null value, so it must have a value every time that you insert a record. Okay. Okay, not null. So what is not null? So not null is a constraint. When you say constraint, just like a criteria in your table. So which means every time that you add a new record, those records must have a value. So when you don't have, or when you set that not null, which means those value is required. So the MySQL will not accept any blank value for that particular column. So in this case, I have several not null values, just like the product code, the barcode, the description, the category, and the price. But I did not provide required value for that stock because it's already 0 and packaging is optional. So when you check the not null, which means those fields are required. Okay. Okay, auto increment. So I have to adjust my slide. Okay, just wait for a while. I will be adjusting the auto increment one. Okay. So what is auto increment? So auto increment, just like I have mentioned in product code, since I set it to integer, auto increment indicates that the value of the column is incremented by 1. Every time that you add record, each record will be numbered from 1 to and so on, depending on the number of records that you have. So I don't have to worry about numbering them, so automatically the database will uh, assign a number to them. Okay, comment. So this is somewhat very helpful in developing a table because when you design a database, make sure you have a comment. This provides documentation, or this is optional, but it allows you to have a proper documentation of the current column or table uh, and its particular purpose. Example, product code is any code, so barcode. So it provides you with a proper description of a particular column. So I guess I recommend you to make a comment, especially when a programmer decides to access your data, so they will have an idea of a particular column that is being available, and it provides documentation, so they don't have to bother you anymore on what the purpose of the particular column, because you already provide a database description or documentation of that particular column. Because sometimes the uh, in a particular setup or a particular what you call this company setup, the one who developed database is their job is just to develop a database, while programmers tends to develop program, but they need to access your database. So as a programmer, they need to have a proper documentation on how they access the database, what particular column or data type that they need to access uh, by in their particular program. So okay, let's continue. Okay, after you define the table name, the database where you want this table to be added, the column, data type, the length, the default, is it primary key or not, or the columns are required or not null, or it's auto increment, or do they require comments or documentation. After that, you need to click the save so that the table will be created. So once saved, a dialog box will appear telling you that the table is successfully created. But sometimes, if you fail to provide a correct, let's say, data type, or you have a missing column, or you forgot to define a correct, let's say you define a column but fail to provide a data type, it will cause an error. So please double check your table before you save them. So once you save, it will give you a message, it is being created, successfully created. Or aside from that, you will have to choose, do you want to create a more table or create a new additional table, yes or no. So if you choose the yes button, it will redirect to another set of description or describing another table. Or if you choose no, you will go back to your object browser. So if you don't have any tables to create, just click no. Otherwise, click yes. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, once your table is created, so it will now appear in the list of tables. So as you can see, we have now the table already. So by the way, sometimes when you operate with SqlYog, you need to click refresh so that the list of objects in your SqlYog will be refreshed, because sometimes it will not appear. So just click F5 or refresh. Okay. Okay, so now let's demonstrate how do we create a table. So let's go back to our SqlYog and define the table. Okay, so let's open our SqlYog. Okay, from this particular window, so as I have said a while ago, all you have to do is to click or select the database and right click, create table. Okay, there. So once you define, or the new table appears, all you have to do is to define the table name. Okay, so in my case, we'll be using the products TBL. So I'll be using the three postfix letters to define that this is a table. So products. Just let me use products. The course, the database, and column. So I'm going to set So if you want to define a column name, so just type the desired name of the column, then choose data type. So you must select from among the list. Okay. So I will be choosing integer right there. Length, so I will not provide because automatically will provided by the SqlYog. Choose primary key. Okay, automatically it will be set to not null and auto increment. So this is my product, unique product code. So it will be unique. So for proper documentation, you must provide this form. Next, P barcode. I will add a prefix letter T that denotes that is for product table. Barcode. So when you type the first letter of the data type, you will be seeing or activated the list for a particular data type. Okay, car. So 0.25. Okay, not now. Description. Okay, car. So since I only have minimal description, depending on your needs, you can use text. Maybe the product has a long description. So for me, it's just a short description. So I will be using 250 characters. No, that I think that's enough. And also it's required because there's no product that has no description. So it's required. You will be requiring the user to store or to add the description to the product. The category. So what is the category of the product? So I'll be using varchar 50 characters depending on the sizes required. Okay. I forgot to mention the comments. Barcode and description of the product. Okay. Product category. Okay, next is price. Aside from category, you need to identify the price of the product. So in my case, I'll be using decimal. I need to 16 digit and 2 decimal point depending on your size. So it's required. So product price. So next, I have the last column here. Don't worry about the preceding columns because it will be automatically added later. So stock. So as you can see, a new blank column is generated. So, in stock, it's integer. Okay. So default 0. Okay. Stocks total. Let's say this column will allow us to identify how many stocks left in our particular product. Or let's say remaining stocks. Anyway, stocks total. Okay. Let's say packaging. So for example, packaging is like in cans. Let's say car. Let's say 25. So this is a type of packaging for the product. Let's say for example, is it in a box? Is it pieces? Is it in a bottle? Something like that. So it depends upon how you describe the packaging of the product so that you can have a category of its item. So once done, all you have to do is to click the yes button. By the way, let us see. Okay. I forgot to adjust the camera. But anyway, so that's the entire implementation that I did. So I forgot to adjust the camera a while ago. But so this is now the full implementation. You are now seeing the comments for each product, the particular setup. So before you develop a table, as I have mentioned a while ago, please make a list first. for you to be able to have a, you know, continuous implementation, because if you don't have any idea of the column, so it will be uh, hard for you to decide later once you create. Okay, just click save, and there. So successfully created. Do you want to create another table? So I choose. Okay, so once created, so just close the table definition. Okay, then as you can see, you have now the table. So there you go. That's how you create a table. Okay, let's proceed. So how do you store records? So I think it is most easiest part aside from creating a database. So the hard part is the creating the table. So once you have the table ready, all you have to do is to expand. Okay, for example, if your database like this, expand the list, look for the tables, and click the table name. Okay, click the table data tab to open the table content. So this is what you call the table tab right there. So as you can see, I have no records yet. Okay, so as you can see, I have no table. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, so let's define the data. Okay, from there, so as you can see, I have list of columns required for the table to be filled up. Okay, so by the way, tap each column to add your data except for auto-numbered column. So since product code is auto-number, so automatically your database will assign a number to it. So just write the corresponding data for each column. So example, I will be adding a data. So let us try this one. Okay, let me adjust my camera. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so let's try. So barcode, let's say I will add a dummy barcode like this. Description, for example, so okay. Okay, so let's try adding a new data. So sample, let's say Lego sardines. So let's say category goods, price, let's say 18.50. Stock, let's say 200 Lego sardines in cans. Okay, that's it. Another example, let's say another barcode. So barcode is a unique number that assigned for each product. Let's say Colgate, 200 grams. Okay, so goods. It's just our example. So let's say by the way, 200 grams. Let's say 45.78 stocks. Let's say 150 in stock, and let's say tube, okay, plastic tube, something like that. Okay, so or let's say box, okay, individual boxes. Okay, so save. So once you add the data and save them, so now you have a data. So as you can see, upon saving, automatically when you click the refresh button, okay. So when you click the save and click the refresh button, so this is the refresh button here. So when you refresh, automatically you now have the record. So automatically it will be numbered from 1 to incrementation. So that's it. Just auto increment. So auto number columns automatically generate numeric sequence. So once you add it. So by the way, this is the refresh button. Okay. So when you refresh, automatically it will be added. So we have also a few options available. So adjusting, if you want to adjust the column depending on your needs, so you just drag and adjust the column size depending on your needs. Okay, so here. Okay, now once you successfully add record for that particular table, how do we back up or export your database? So meaning you are going to store it as a backup, or you are going to use it as a database to restore in a different computer. Okay. So how do we do that? First, you need to choose the database from the object browser. This is where you choose which database are you going to backup or export. Second, go to the database menu, choose backup, export, and choose backup database as SQL or SQL dump. Or as a shortcut, you can use the shortcut Ctrl-Alt-E in your keyboard. So you are going to define. So there are actually three options. It's either structure only, which means the definition of the table, the tables in the database you're going to export, or the data of the tables only. So when you choose data only, by the export type definition itself says you're going to back up the data only without the table itself. Or you can choose data and structure. So in my case, I recommend to use this option because aside from the table, aside from the database, you also choose to restore the data or export the data. Then you need to choose the location where your file should be saved or stored. So just click this browse button. So upon selection, I recommend to use the desktop for easier access or easier to find, and choose the file name of your backup file. So you have to define a descriptive file name plus add the .SQL extension name for databases. Okay. So there is also a object selection. So depending on your needs, it's either you choose the tables only, the views. So you just check the objects that you need to include in your backup. So in my case, I choose all objects. Then click the export button. Okay. So once you click the export button, you will have a indicator, progress indicator, that identifies that you have processing a backup, and once done, you will be seeing now exported successfully. So look for it in a directory that you desired or that you set a while ago. So in my case, I have a drive C, so it will be saved there. So that's the location where I need to go when I need to copy this. So sometimes SqlYog, since you have a portable version, and unexpectedly closes, so just reopen and repeat the process. Okay. So let's demonstrate. So go to your database. Okay. So go to your database. Choose backup export SQL dump. Okay. So now you will be seeing a option like this one. So I choose structure and data, and of course I need to browse my location. So in this case, I will choose desktop as my primary location. So desktop. Okay. So since the dialog box wants me to assign a file name, so I'll be defining the name of my database. So ABC store DB. So I suggest to assign a name the same with the database that you define, so that you will not be confused of the contents of the database or that particular, or the name of that particular backup. So SQL. So make sure you have this extension and descriptive name. It's saved. So this is now the location. Okay. So if you take a look at the location, so depending on your computer directory, so I have stored it on my desktop. Okay. So choose the objects. So I will choose all. Okay. Then I choose structure and data, and export. So now it's exported. So done. So all you have to do is go to your desktop and look for your data. So in my case, I'm going to go to my desktop. So as you can see, I have now the file or the backup file of my database. Okay, sorry. So this is now my database there. So I have now this one. So this is now my database. Okay, so that's how you back up your database. And of course, if you want to restore them, just follow my instruction from previous module. So if you want to restore the database to a different computer, just go to the module I provided. Okay, you're good to go. Okay, that's all. If you have questions with regards to the procedure, please do not hesitate to message me in our LMS portal or send a private message, and hopefully you follow the procedure efficiently. So thank you very much and God bless.